significant? The whole not wanting to change genetics, was that to create a hive mind?
Actually, remember,
the closer the morphic resonance, i.e. ants, bees, whatever, the more hive mind you're going to create.
That's the right question. This all has to do with what's the difference between individuation versus hive mind. That's this whole story. Or Borg mentality. So the whole story is about that, so we should investigate that a little bit. Remember, in the ancient seraphim culture, this is a very high culture. Their charged fields are so coherent that they can steer star systems. These are the Time Nebulae, the high-winged dragons. This was a powerful culture. But in the process of this fall, they lost track of the pure principle that allowed DNA to implode and get ignited with bliss. Remember, the title of our story is Ignition of DNA. So, in the process of losing track of what was keeping DNA on fire, there was desperation. How do we keep our DNA from decaying? Oh, let's make genetic records of the history of the last 1,000,000 years and keep track so the DNA doesn't decay anymore. This is the seraphim. This is who Joseph Smith was talking to at the Origin of the Mormons, right? We must track our DNA so it doesn't fall apart even more. Oh my God. Oh, goodness that we should ever set it free. That would be scary. Well, it isn't. So this was a failure to recognize the primal intelligence of DNA, obviously. This was an insult to DNA. But the insult to DNA that resulted in hive mind, do you know why total telepathy prevents compassion? If you, yes.
We don't need to feel.
It's all good. Excellent. Very good answer. Very good. Go to the head of the class, Ron.
Thank you.
Yes. If you never feel separate, you can't feel the agony of what it is to be separate, and so you can't experience the need for compassion, which initiates the turning inside out, the feeling, precisely. So in this culture, they had evolved an extreme telepathy, and that telepathy is related to the gold powder story, which we're about to get to. So let's see if I put my gold powder in here. I did, I thought. The gold powder. Ooh, the gold powder story. So, the problem of the advancing telepathy and the decay of individuation had everything to do with the addiction to the real gold powder. And that's what we must understand here in terms of the cause of the Nephilim fall. That's where we're going with this story. So, the wars had been murderous. This culture had welded themselves to too much metal. They had evolved a technology to create a form of immortality. The suspensors around Harkonnen, Ariel, Sharon in life support, same physics, yeah? This is a Borg phenomenon. And,
that's so great.
Yeah, and so they were now using metallic systems to support DNA, but the direct result of that was DNA stopped imploding. So suddenly they've got an evolved technology involving metal to prevent aging, but their DNA keeps decaying faster. Oh my God, they got a problem. So in this culture, originally, when a high telepathic dragon queen, Asa Uru, containing thousands of generations of genetic memory, was ready to die, 10,000 years these dragons would live to be, 5 to 10,000 years. When she was ready to die, she would normally pass on her hive mind memory to the next queen with a skull touch, in which a spark, piezoelectric bone, passed, called Baphomet. And the new queen would enter a swoon and would wake up with the dream with 1,000 generations of tribal memory. When they lost the ability to have that level of charge density and bliss, they began to use quartz crystal skulls to do that, which sadly were not implosive and became control devices and was evidence of the problem, not the solution, actually. Yes? Because remember, the electrical signature of quartz is hex. The SiO2 bond is a cubic lattice with a hex top view of the quartz helix and is non-implosive, and that's the problem, not the solution. Which is why people who use just the quartz bowls actually have astral hygiene problems, whereas people who use quartz with gold maybe have a little bit more of the potential implosion. Anyway, we digress. So, another aspect of this part of the story was that their way of producing psychoactive kids, star navigators, guild navigators, those who could make gravity in their genes, their technique for evolving the advanced ones involved feeding them something called the oil of Messe. Messe means crocodile juice. And it was the reptilian juice. It was a highly psychoactive, melatonin, serotonin-rich menstrual blood called starfire. And this menstrual blood's name, Messe, is the origin of our word Messiah. A Messiah is one who has been fed the oil of Messe. And it serves the function exactly of royal jelly in a beehive. So kids who get that high melatonin, serotonin-rich menstrual blood evolve an explosion of growth in the high glands at a very young age and become gravity-making star navigators, highly psychoactive, shamanic, etc., etc. Their high gland structure gets extremely well nourished. Yeah? So this was a way of breeding the leaders of the dragon tribe. The part of the skill that required to generate this was an advanced lineage of what we could call Vestal virgins, who were women who had access to bliss. And their access to bliss process in the temple, which is a capacitor, allowed their blood to be fired, and they could make this starfire. Sadly, they lost the skill to keep that culture alive, and so there was no more melatonin, serotonin in that blood, and their Messiah culture began to decay, and they needed a substitute. Okay? The substitute was the gold powder. That substance would form a kind of substitute for this starfire. And it's true that if you eat the gold powder, your eyes turn blue and you live forever, supposedly. But they maybe missed the fine print on the medicine bottle, may cost you your soul. And that's what we want to discuss. The nature of implosion here is chemically induced. So yes, your DNA gets the phase conjugation to go through a black hole, but the phase conjugation path is mechanically induced and therefore painful. Yeah. So this is the real David Hudson's generated monoatomic gold. Now, when you eat the stuff, what happens is your DNA's electric field is induced externally toward fractality, and it induces implosion in the DNA. The mechanical result is that you hear your ears ring, like Kundalini onset, but the ringing is mechanically induced. The normal ears ring is called sangreal, sound current sung in the blood, and it is the voices of your ancestors. The problem is that if you get too many radio stations and you haven't built the tuner, that's called schizophrenia. And so this is what happens when you get the gold powder addiction. You get all these radio stations in your DNA, but you don't have the beingness implosively to be the tuner, and the result, as both diagnosed, is called fractionation of the personality. The Chinese, for example, would eat a thin film of gold on their cake, and it does have profound colloidal gold function, and a little bit is useful to biology, but it's tricky. And they didn't understand all this very well, sorry. They really didn't understand. So, Zechariah Sitchin says, the reason they came here to mine the gold, looking for a heart of gold, because they were growing old. Zechariah Sitchin says, the reason they came here to mine the gold was because they were using it to repair the home atmosphere. Which is true and good physics, but it's essentially a cover story. More importantly, they were eating the gold. It's called manna in the Bible, the spice in Dune. It was served in a round white wafer, which is the origin of Holy Communion. And eating white wheat flour is pretty stupid, I think. Anyway. So the ability to create the chemistry to do this became later the Ark of the Covenant story and the banking economy of the Essenes. So now we've set this background. Now we can understand a little bit more about what's happening on Sirius A. Sirius A is a culture that's under the thumb of the Dracu. But on Antu, the king is sympathetic to the remnant humanoid culture that has survived in the migrations from the Lyran Wars. So now I'm going to show you a slide from Stuart Swerdlow from his experience at Montauk and the various ET races involved in cooking up Earth DNA. And this is an excerpt from my article, solarlimitation.com/invasion. And I'm going to show you the 12 primary, I think it's 12, primary ET races involved in cooking up Earth DNA. Can't see it very well. I'll read it for you. So this is called the founders of the Galactic Federation, over 110 colonies, roughly associated with what we're calling the galactic core cultures here. Yeah? And here is the original galactic civilization, kind of a humanoid home. Some say some of this DNA actually came from Earth way far back. But anyway, there's a huge humanoid civilization here that was wiped out when the Draco, the Alpha Draconis, had this war, and millions died here. And there was a diaspora, and escapees, the humanoid remnant, went to all these. Rigel, Procyon, Arcturus, Antares, there's Nordic, there's Tau Ceti, we should have, yeah, Procyon. Procyon and Tau Ceti were non-interventionist. The Sirius A was called non-interventionist, but they would sell guns to both sides of the war any day. Anyway, you see here the Sirius A is the primary origin of Egypt and the Hebrews. And this is kind of where we're telling this part of the story. Okay, the Sirius A, origin of Egypt and the Hebrew. This is where we are with right here. Okay? The story is that this culture here had intended that the genetic influences on Earth would actually be a fractal of the Orion Wars, so they could breed a vaccine. That's the story. And the story is that Enki was actually forced to be harmonically inclusive in his genetic experiments here for political reasons back here. But that's backing up in our story. We want to tell the local story. The local story is here that Antu, because of his sympathy with the remnant humanoids who were losing. Remember, here now, the Empire is striking back. Antu does something illegal in this Draco culture, and that is he creates a DNA that is more psychoactive than is allowed. And so he is concerned about the Empire striking back, and in fact, this is the Terminator story. It's quite real here, actually. So the rest of this story about the bloodline of Enki and all the major civilizations of Earth and the Empire striking back has roots back here. Yeah. So Anu is sympathetic. The humanoids are losing. They lost. They're in bad shape. The Asa Uru are winning. They're a mechanical culture, female-dominated, telepathy-ruled, highly metallic, and they are not interested in evolving more psychoactive DNA. From their point of view, a psychoactive DNA, a highly powerful shaman, could mess up the computer on a starship warship, and that's not good. So we got to keep these psychoactive humanoids from evolving. This is more the fallen Nephilim point of view. The high culture here is totally aware that you've got to set DNA free or your stars are going to fall apart. But the Nephilim here have these misunderstandings. Oops. And this is what we need to fix by understanding this.